Again, thank you for joining. This is all about applying to Luminate, tips and any questions you have. This is me. I'm the Director of Operations. It's an old picture. I've been here since day one. I built the first website and started off with Sujatha, who is the Managing Director. And it was just her and I from day one building this out. So what is Luminate? We are an investment fund. We're a startup accelerator, and we're the only one that's focused on optics, photonics, and imaging, and I'll call them enabled applications. So you could be doing something very direct with optics and imaging, or you could be using a cell phone camera to process information and really have a software startup. So we've worked with all range of applicants. This is what we're looking for, in a sense, augmented and virtual reality, so AR, VR, autonomous vehicles, machine vision, biophotonics, healthcare, life sciences. We will work with consumer products too, as long as they're using the optics, photonics, and imaging aspect of it. They fit within our charter. We are funded by New York State, so we're funded by, it's called Empire State Development. So we are a New York-based economic development organization in a sense, and so that in New York State, everything that I will talk about in the application will be going towards how can you actually really get the value of what we have to offer here in Rochester and then New York State in general. So this is the overall process. Applications are open until January 7th. We host them on F as in Frank, the number 6, and then S as in Sam.com. You can get there just from our website though, if you hit the apply button up on the Luminate site. The process is we get all our applications in, they close, and then we down select to 20 to 25 finalists. Those 20 to 25 teams will pitch to our board. Usually it's in person, but obviously this year will be remote. So we'll bring in our board, and then we'll also bring in any specific subject matter experts. If you're doing quantum or something that we might not have in-house, we'll bring in someone outside to get a good overview on what your business is doing. At the end of those pitches, we down select 10 teams who then get the invite to attend Luminate. So, and then the program begins April 2021. Let me go through that just a little bit more. I have a better timeline. So this is how we do it. We do an up to $100,000 investment, and that will come in the form of a safe note, or if you are a European or foreign company, we would do a convertible note. So, and same process as the past couple of years. We do our program, runs for about 6 months, and then we have our finals. And at the finals, we do $1 million investment into one team. And then we take a second $1 million and we invest it usually across 3 teams. So like a $500,000 investment and then two $250,000 investments. So what we're really offering, obviously funding is huge and it's key. We also bring a lot of other investors to the table as well too. So we're never the only money that's there. We put you in front of a ton of different VCs from all sectors all over the US. Usually we actually go visit them, like we would go to Boston and do a pitch, New York do a pitch. Obviously that's changed this year, but hopefully that'll come back soon. Besides the funding and the funding opportunities that we get, we have our advisory board. I highly recommend going to our team page and taking a look. They are very active, which if you've been in any other accelerator is not always the case. I speak to these people all the time. They're very engaged with startups, and they become mentors for your teams. In addition to them, we give you access to the New York State's photonics cluster, which is really based up here in Rochester. There's about 150 optics and photonics companies here. So we really integrate you into the ecosystem, which is very key in, whether it be supply chain or design or whatever challenge you have at that point in time with your company, we can put you in touch with the right people. We do have an optics lab that's fully equipped and staffed. Granted, obviously this year, we don't expect everybody to be on site, so it may or may not be of value to you, but we definitely have it, and especially for teams that get follow-on funding, they usually use the lab quite a bit. And then we have incubator facilities where it's like we're in a huge floor of I'll call it a remodeled building from the early 1900s, so it's a beautiful space. So again, for the application process, we require that you be incorporated or at least be incorporated by the time Luminate starts, which is April 1. So you can apply even if you do not have, if you're not an LLC or a C Corp right now. you can certainly apply, but you would need to become one for us to be able to make an investment in April. We need at least 2 full-time dedicated team members. You've got to have proven tech at lab scale. And then you have to have C-level members who are able to participate. That's very key. You can have additional people participate as well. We've had people bring in their salespeople. Sometimes they'll bring in an intern with them so they can start to learn and get some knowledge. So that's no problem. But we definitely have to have C-level members because we need people who can make decisions, because decisions are being taken all the time. As I mentioned, we apply in F6S. I'll go through the profile in short video when I go to the web page. But basically, applications close January 7th, and then finalists are selected February 20th. And then April 1 of 2021 is when we begin the accelerator. And then I believe it's October 14th, but don't hold me to that date. We, in conjunction with the Optical Society of America, which is OSA, we have our finals and part of their national or international convention. So we get a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people watching that. And that's where we invest the $2 million total that day. So let me just do one thing. I want to make sure there's nobody in the waiting room. Just people coming in, so I apologize. Let me just get everybody in here. Co-host. Great. So let's do this. Let's run through the application quickly, and then we'll go into individual questions that can either be for the group or they could be for, we can go into a breakout room. So let me get my screen shared. And then I'll answer. I just saw a question come up on chat. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in chat as well too. So let me get to my screen.
So when we have 1 second, sorry, 0.5 seconds, we have.
And if I can ask everybody who's not, you can please be on mute, unless you're speaking, of course.
Then.
Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. And if you can't, send us something in the chat, we'll get it fixed. This is the application, it's up on F6S. If you just search Luminate New York, or you can go directly from our website. First thing, if you're not already part of F6S, they house a ton of accelerators and incubators applications. They're probably the biggest one in the world. So if you're not already part of them, I would create your team there. It's very simple, basically your founders, pictures, just basic information. And then you can use that same information to apply to any other accelerator or incubator or funding opportunity. So some of these are going to be super basic, so I'm going to run right through them, but any questions we can get to, we can either go do in group or do privately. So first question is obviously, how did you hear about Luminate? We'd love to know, did you hear from me? Did you see an ad? Did you get an email and you subscribe to the lens? Some way to let us know. Because we, just like with your company, we like to know where we are getting our conversions in a sense. Then we go into the whole company section, basically give a one-line description of your company. That's really your value proposition. When you were incorporated or when you plan on incorporating, if you're haven't incorporated prior to the application deadline. Next thing we do is the 12-month trailing and projected revenues. We understand that there's many of the companies we've had are pre-revenue. So you can write pre-revenue in there. It's not going to be a negative in terms of how your application is viewed. In terms of how much money you've raised, I would give your total and make sure you include your friends and family round or anything that you have that's actually been raised. You can include your grants if you have those, and that's in the next question here. What we want you to break it down. So you could have an angel investor for X number of dollars, an SBIR grant for this, but we need to basically see how it's broken down. The next question is, have you ever participated in another accelerator or incubator? And you would think that might be a detriment. Even, we've had companies be like, oh, is it okay that I've done this already? We actually like companies that have been through them because that means that they've already been pre-vetted and they've got a certain amount of knowledge that they're coming into it with, which is great. So it's no problem if you have been in one, and it's no problem if you haven't. There is no, there's no weighted benefit to it. You can skip this unless you're an international company. And the key question is, are you really looking to establish a US operation? Because that's really key. So for any international companies, need you to detail that and detail your reasons why and where and those type of things. Hopefully it would be in Rochester or New York State. We then ask you to list your board members. This is not your advisory board. This is actual formal board members for your corporation if you have them. Excuse me. You may not have a board just yet. It might just be you and a co-founder or two co-founders. That's okay. You can put that down there. Again, it's not a detriment to you. Next, we get into the team section. Very basic. Please list your teams and roles. Basically break everybody down in terms of the CEO. This is who they are, CTO, COO, whatever those roles are. And then we want to actually hear in your own words the strengths of your team. Because it's always interesting. You could look at a LinkedIn profile, or you could read something online about somebody, but it's great to hear from the founders themselves what they believe their strengths in the team are. How many full-time employees do you have? Definitely need to know that. And then this question, which is a little bit different, obviously this year, is which members of your founding or executive team will be attending the program in person? We will be obviously remote starting out. That might be for the entire program. We might have some on site. Again, it's really anybody's guess is as good as mine at this point, but we went fully remote back in March with all of our teams. And we had teams from obviously the US, but also Norway, Denmark, Germany, India, and we ran, I don't want to say flawlessly, but very, very smoothly. So we're able to do this remote. We work with everybody's schedule quite well. Jumping down to customers and markets. What markets does your company serve? Pretty straightforward. And then who are your customers? If you have current customers or you're doing a pilot program with someone, we definitely would like to know that. And if you're not, who are your customers in the future? Because that's really a key thing. A lot of times startups especially will think that, X is their customer when it's really Y who makes the purchasing decision. So really Y is the true customer. So we'd like to know who that is in your space. And then we'd like to know who are your competitors and then how are you advantaged to them? So if you can, if Johnson & Johnson is a competitor or Intel or whomever, just give us the URLs and then also let us know, why you think your technology and your business is different and has an advantage. So describe your customer traction. Again, if you're pre-revenue, you might not have a ton of traction, but you will at least have customer discovery. You will have testimonials from pilot program people. Anything you can do to show us that you have some traction. On the technology, just briefly describe your technology. We want to know what it is you do and how you do it. Don't share anything confidential. You wouldn't want to do that with pretty much any accelerator, but just be able to give us a broad overview of what your technology and what it does. Next question is, how does it utilize optics, photonics, and imaging or enable that industry? That's key. Obviously, that's part of our charter. So we need to be working with companies that are using or utilizing it and enabling it in the industry. And then lastly is the current status of your technology. And that's called the TRL level, which is technology readiness level. And it could be at a 1, it could be at a 7. If you see the link over here, you can get breakdown from how the US Army labels them and just give an accurate assessment. We work with companies that are level 1, level 5, level 6. It doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of, is it a good business and a good team? So can you participate on site in Rochester? Again, it will not have a direct impact on you this year versus other years where if there's companies that couldn't come at all to Rochester, would definitely not work as well. But this year being remote, or at least partially remote, it should be an easy thing for each of the companies. Now we're going to start getting into some of the things, and I'll add this as after the end of this as well, is we'd like to know, do you have any current relationships in New York State? Is your supplier here? Do you have university, did you do a tech transfer from a university? Do you have any customers? Anything that shows that you've engaged with any New York State based entity, it definitely is helpful. It's helpful for us to know, and it shows, from ESD, which is our funding agent, I'm very happy to have, it shows that we're actually leveraging New York State and the resources that they have. And then from the last question, just what do you hope to get out of Luminate? And it sounds like a simple question, but really we want you to put some thought into it and show not only what do we get out of Luminate, but here comes sort of a tip on the application, which I'll go over in just a moment, is how do you think Luminate can help you as well, and where the value that Luminate would bring to your company, and then where you'd be, 6 months from now after being in Luminate. And then lastly, we ask you to do a video. Prior to Zoom, you could be a selfie, it doesn't matter, we could care less about production quality, but we really just want to hear from the founders or the C team, what is their business and what do you do? We like to hear it in your own words. Very key to put that up on YouTube or Vimeo, but make it unlisted, not private. If it's private and you send us a password, our board members are not going to be able to view it. So just make sure it's unlisted and put in the URL there. This last piece is if you want to ask for recommendations. I'll be honest, I don't think I've had any or many companies that all use it, but this is just there. It's part of an F success piece. So overall, and I'm going to get to the questions I see in the chat and then we can do group or one-on-one. I'd say a key component of your application is highlighting, if you have it at this point, what you're working with or doing within New York State or how you could leverage the ecosystem. Meaning, we're a company, we're based out of California, and we need supply chain help, we need some optical design or whatever the need is, and we feel that company X, Y, and Z that are based in Rochester would be great assets to have, and we'd be able to utilize, and that's our plan. Or if you're already working with them or speaking to them, I would highly recommend putting that in your application somewhere. It's really key. That's really the biggest tip or trick, so to speak, of the application. Is how could you leverage Luminate? Because our goal is to have successful companies. We are a nonprofit, but we have a for-profit investment vehicle. So we look at everything like a typical accelerator would do in terms of from a business perspective. So that's really key. Let me just jump over really quickly to get some of the chat questions here. So the first one is, does this program involve equity? So what I'd like to say that, yes, it does, but it's done in the form of a safe note or a convertible note. And what that does is it's very startup friendly. It's what everybody does now. And I had a previous startup that I founded, and it's exactly the same process. And what that means is it's a document that is signed that states that we're investing X number of dollars into your company, and that then at a future qualified financing round, where you're bringing in professional VCs or you're raising $1 million or 500,000 or whatever that trigger is, at that point we convert to an equity piece. But at that point you're worth more than you were the day that you signed with Luminate. So it's very startup friendly, and it's very, it's just the standard. We use documents from nvca.org, which is the National Venture Capital Association. It's done as sort of pro bono by VC lawyers, and it's really what Y Combinator uses. It's really just the standard and a great starting place or starting point if you're looking to get some more information. Let me go through another question here. Is there a TRL range? I don't think that there's really a range. It needs to be past lab scale, and that's really the key, because then after that it becomes, is this technology valuable? Is there a business behind it? Because there's tons of technology that's out there that's just not a business behind. So that's really key. Let's see. What is the value of your in-kind? Well, I think hopefully I answered that, meaning that we're doing a safe or convertible note, and that value then gets ascribed at your next qualifying financing round. So,
sorry, Andrew.
I'm sorry?
Hello, Andrew, this is Kazan.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, I just wanted to elaborate more on the question. I meant more your in-kind, more like the labs and microscope, because usually when you apply for grants, right, they ask you what is the value of the in-kind. Is it $1 million, $500,000? Do you have any number?
I don't think that we have enough. I'm gonna be a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? Optimistic. I think that it's almost invaluable. We don't have a set dollar amount, and we don't charge companies. Like, we don't charge like a fee to be in the program. We don't charge fees for the lab. But the value that we're bringing, it's not considered in kind, but you're getting the board, you're getting Sujatha, who is the managing director. She is a scientist and a business founder. And so she's got every basis covered. You get Damon, who is our technology manager. He's an optics PhD, and you get me, and I'm a startup guy. So you have a team, and then and Gary, who's our optics technician, excuse me, we can forget to leave him out. You get a whole team behind you, including our board. So I don't think that there's a dollar value.
No, I understand that, because the reason I ask, because there's a grant program here in Canada. I'm from Montreal, and usually the way it works is that, okay, you have this incubator, accelerator. Tell us, you're going to use, let's say, their labs, their microscope, or whatever they're providing. What is the dollar value you think, or the accelerator thing, that is bringing as an in-kind?
Well, I think that excuse me, I think that that's something then we would leave for you as a startup to determine, because if you were using labs and it would cost you, I'm making up a number, 1,000 Canadian dollars, and that's what I would say is the value. We do not have a set value on any of the
Okay, so you don't have.
pieces.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So the next one is their valuation cap on the safe. Usually there is, and it's a pretty generous one, because most companies coming in, a lot of them are pre-revenue, so it's very hard, excuse me, to really gauge as to what somebody's value is. But there's generally a valuation cap. It's very fair and friendly. We haven't had, and we've done 30 companies so far, and plus follow-on rounds, excuse me, and we haven't had any issues whatsoever. Regarding recommendations, can you please add the possibility to upload PDF file? That's going to be tricky because this is hosted by F6S. What I recommend doing is somewhere in there in the application, why Luminate, one of the last questions, I'd also put a link to that PDF, put it up on Dropbox or some free site, and then we can have access to it there.
Andy, before you go on, I just want to make sure the very first question was actually a twofer from Dorothy Goldman. It says our company is joined with another company in Europe. We want to jointly apply. Does this model work?
Yes, as long as, well, I guess that's a tricky situation. I guess the key would be is, where does the IP reside? It could reside in the European company, or could reside in the American one. But at some point, if you were to get follow-on funding from us, we'd need you to have a US parent, or somehow have that IP tied to it so that we can be protected, so that it's not a shell company. So I think as long as it's spelled out in your agreement, you're able to show that it's a joint venture or whatever the case is, I don't think that would be a problem. Again, as long as we have participation from the C-level, and we probably want it from both sides, depending on your business. Again, I don't know enough to discuss, but I'll have my email after this at the end. And if anybody has any other more specific questions or answers that I don't have, I can get them for you at that point. And that was Kate, who just jumped in. She's our marketing manager. She will work with all the teams on videos. Oh, there she is. Social, press releases, you name it.
Okay.
So we would like to connect with specialists in color reading techniques. Does the Accelerator provide access to specialists in this area? Well, since I'm not an optics guy, I can't say 100% yes, but I can say 100% that we've never had any company have a request that we could not put them in touch with, whether we have it in the Rochester, New York ecosystem, or whether we're out in California. Our network is very wide. I mean, we go from, the person who runs Oculus out in Seattle, he's actually from Rochester originally, so very close to Sujatha. Again, this is not necessarily color reading techniques, but I'll give you an overall breadth of who we work with. We work with Applied Materials. We work with LDV Capital in New York. We have teams present to the Boston Angel Group, which is the largest angel group in the US, and obviously heavily med tech. So between all of our network and our network touch points, I am 99.9% positive that we could put you in touch with an expert or someone to assist in your color reading techniques. So what other questions does anyone have on the application? And if it's something you want to do privately, just send it, put that in the chat, or let me know you want to go into a breakout room. Happy to answer anything if it's not. Is patent pending or provisional? No, that is acceptable. We don't have to have a granted patent required, but you do have to, if you are claiming that you have a patent, we have to obviously be able to prove that you have submitted and it's provisional. A lot of companies will do their patent writing. We work with a patent agent here that does a great training session. So IP we're really big on. So we work with that. And then also Darius Sankey, who's on our board, does a whole IP strategy and mapping thing for each of the teams. So we really want to emphasize that IP is key. Let's see, do you know any VR hardware companies having representation in Rochester? I don't, but Damon, who is our technical manager, will, and he's tied to all of those companies. I mean, I know the CEOs of like Optimax and Avatar or whatnot, so I am sure that they are doing something like that. I know that Vuzix is in Rochester and they do the glasses. So yes, the answer is there will be VR hardware companies here.
There's a question just above that one from Arthur.
Yep.
Or the question
Much
from
detail?
how much detail?
Yeah. Keeps jumping on me. So I would go in terms, I would give enough detail on the technology. You wouldn't want to give a ton, like so much that somebody's going to stop reading, but I would give enough information on technology and why it is so different, or why is it 10 times better than X that's out there, and really why does that technology make a good business. I would just give a very broad overview on how it actually works. What happens is when we get down to even before we get down to the 20 to 25 teams, a lot of times we'll reach out to companies and we'll say, hey, we saw this on your application, looks interesting, can you please detail a little bit more? And at that point, that's a great time to go into super technical things if that's what we're asking for. So I think that is key, is to put enough information on your application so we understand it all, and then just know that we will always go back and ask questions if we have them. Let's see, new IP develops in the Accelerator, who owns it? You own it. So we don't, we're not a university, we don't do any type of invention with you. We help you. We will put you in touch with experts that can help you, or on our staff, but we do not touch your IP. We now have two very different products, one optical VR and now one biologic measure, kid tissue. We would have to pick, yes. There's never really been a company, we've had a couple of companies that have come in with two products. They're doing, here we're doing product A, it's for this market, and this is product B that is for this market, or it could be product A that is for both markets. It is very hard, if not impossible, for a startup, it's hard enough for a major company to do it, but a startup to be on a split path would be very challenging to be successful, because you really have to do, in a sense, one thing and do it really well. So I would then say in your application, hey, these are the two products that we're working on, and here's where we feel is the strongest case, and the strongest case why Rochester and the ecosystem here could benefit us and get us, faster to milestones and go to market and those type of things. And that's what I'd focus on. I would still mention that you have the other product, because that might trigger questions from our board members. And who knows, you might think that product A is the one you should be going with first, but after you're getting some advice from some CEOs of these companies, you might then change your outlook. We've had companies that pivoted right in the middle of our program. Actually, this year they did. We actually thought that they might even be going under a month into the program, and turns out they pivoted and they just raised, I want to say it's about $500,000 US that they're just closing on. So never, it's not a problem to have more technology, but really you need to have a focus on one. Requirements to working prototypes, required proof of that in application. Well, if you have a video of it, that's always great. If you have any data to back it up, if you say that we're going to create solar panels that increase energy output, or take in energy by 60%, or some really crazy number, or even if it wasn't crazy, we want to have you then say, and this has been third-party validated by X, Y, and Z. You don't have to put that document in there, but just by saying third party validated by X, Y, and Z company will let us know that you have done the actual work. And then we might ask to see the documentation afterwards. But from an application standpoint, I think it's key just to show, to make your assumption, your excuse me, your status claim, and then also put some proof behind it too. Excuse me. I got to take some water here, sorry. I have a digital prototype, but not a physical one yet. Is this acceptable, or is a physical one needed? If so, I could have it available by the start of the incubator. I don't, depending, everybody, how do I answer this? I don't think that it's necessary to have your physical prototype. I think if you have the digital and the technology is proven, meaning you've already done tests and you can show lab tests, I think that would be okay. Again, it's so specific to a product or a technology that it's hard to answer definitively. But I think if you're able to say that we have a digital prototype and we will have a physical one by March 31st or whatever the date is, that actually shows us your roadmap. And I think that would be okay from the board's point of view. Let's see. Kate, have I missed any so far? They scroll by as I'm talking. So.
I don't think so. I think you got them all.
All right. I'm trying to think what other questions I can answer that people tend to ask. One question I get a lot of, or we have a discussion about, is our companies, the portfolio companies. I would say, as someone who came from a startup, and I've worked with tons of them now all over the world, this accelerator is very different. Usually, if you go to Y Combinator, which is phenomenal, but it's not necessarily an optics, photonics, and imaging, they're really software focused model. But if you go to any other accelerator, HAX or Mass General, whatever it is, you'll go through the accelerator, you'll get funding hopefully, and you'll get information, and you'll be able to leverage that and springboard on. But generally, you don't have that much contact with them afterwards. At least that's what I've been told by our portfolio companies. And the one thing we do is we actually work with all of our companies, well past the finals. Even if they didn't get funded from us in the finals, it's still in our best interest to have the companies be successful. We'll still put the right companies in front of VCs, because it wasn't the right investment for us at the finals time doesn't mean it's not a good investment now. So there are numerous cases of companies that did not win in the finals that have actually even gotten follow-on investment from us. So it's a very, I don't want to say family-like atmosphere, but we always say the phrase that Sujatha and I always say is once Luminate, you're always Illuminate. So very different. I don't want to say it's a different model, but it's a very different experience, I think, being Luminate. I speak to, all the cohort companies. For me to get an email or for them to get an email from me at any point in time is very normal. And because everybody still has needs. So we're here to help. So in terms of how many applications, it is a competitive process. We usually get a bit over 100. They're worldwide. So it's a very competitive process. What I try to tell people is, if you're thinking of applying, or you and I have had a one-on-one conversation, I'm like, yeah, you should definitely apply. I would 100% apply, because the worst case scenario is that your company is looked at by everybody on our board. And if you don't get chosen as one of the 20-25 finalists, then you can at least ask for feedback, and you're going to get valuable feedback from, Stu Elby, who's one of the heads over at Madison Square Ventures, or Milton Chang, who's a legendary VC, or Don Galini, who's the chairman of the board, who's extremely active with us, who started QED and exited out of there. So as I tell people, it's literally the worst case scenario is that you get phenomenal feedback. But that's the worst case. It only gets better from there. You get to then the next step up is you would get to present to our board in person. So now remotely at this point, but you're building a relationship, even if then you don't get selected down to the 10. Next step from that is you get one of the 10s, and now you're getting up to $100,000 investment. So it just only goes up from there. And I guess to to add on to that point, there's companies that have also said, hey, you know what, we're not sure if we're too early for Luminate. Let's wait till next year to apply. And I tell every company that's not the best way to go about it. And I'll use an example of Sun Density. Our first year in 2017, we were taking applications. Sun Density applied. They're a company out of Boston. And they came in with this technology and they had all this information and they did the presentation. And I'd say a majority of the board was like, we don't believe these numbers, come back at another time when you actually have some data validation. So year 2 comes along and I'm still speaking to the CEO because he actually was emailing me throughout the year. Comes in year 2 and he's got some data and validation, but it's still not enough. Everybody's still pretty skeptical. I mean, he was making large claims. But he built a connection with Sujatha and we ended up working with him on some lab work to try to help him prove out his technology a bit. And then the third year he applied, he gets in and he ends up becoming the $1 million winner this year. So, they closed a multi-million-dollar round at the same time. So starting early is always a good thing because once you get in the pipeline, you're in a conversation with me or you're in a conversation with Sujatha, or if you need technical help or even technical questions, everybody here in the ecosystem, it's really easy for us to get a phone call or a Zoom meeting with any of the CEOs of any of these companies that are based here. So it's highly advantageous, I think. New question. My company is not yet incorporated, but 100% plans to incorporate with 2 full-time founders by April, started Luminate. Will that be an issue? Nope, absolutely not. As long as you can state definitively, we have not formed a company and the reason is we haven't done it yet because of X, Y, and Z, but if we are to be selected to attend Luminate, we would be incorporated prior to the start and we would have 2 full-time founders. So that is definitely not a problem.
Andy, I just want to chime in and say, people can unmute themselves too if you'd like to elaborate on the question that you're asking. You can certainly do that and chime in. I wanted to add the question that I think comes up, which is how can Luminate support you if your business is sort of shifting? What comes to mind is a company from our previous cohort, Hakian, and how they ended up shifting their application. So I just answered this question myself, but if you wanted to elaborate on Luminate support through a change in your business during their time in the accelerator.
Yeah, and I think that I've mentioned one before as well, the company that had to do a major pivot and that just raised about 500,000. It was a huge change in their using the technology in a more, I don't want to say business friendly, but a more business opportunity way. And it changed the whole trajectory of their company. There's no guarantees that'll happen, but it has happened within the cohort. And as she mentioned, Hakian is another example. They're a company out of India. Let's see, any other questions so far? And as Kate mentioned, feel free to unmute. If you do have questions after this is over and still questions haven't been answered or you have a new question, you can either email info@luminate.org. That's probably the easiest one to remember and spell, or even go to the website. There's a live chat. I usually manage that, and usually I'll get back to you within just like 2 or 3 minutes. So there's multiple ways to contact and connect if you have additional questions.
And I wanted to share, because I've been admitting people as this has been going on, and I just admitted someone new. Anyone who is registered for this, you will receive a recording of the entire thing in your inbox afterwards. So, you can review what was asked. There will be a way for you to reach out to Andy to ask any follow-up questions that came up. Maybe if you're too shy here and you don't want to ask it live, you can certainly reach out separately through email. So that will be in your inbox later today as well.
Good point. And one other thing I'll mention, if you go to our website, luminate.org, there is a link there for what's called the Lens. And that's a monthly recap of what we've done in the accelerator. So in February, we started in January last year for cohort 3. So in February, we released, a look back on January. And it basically went through all the companies and what they were going through and basically a live look in at the program. So I would highly recommend going through some of those old issues, and you'll actually see how the program is run and what's going on a monthly basis and how much activity and what's being what value is being brought. And then obviously you can sign up and be automatically on that list for any future ones coming out as well.
Just to throw a marketing note in there, in addition to the curriculum that you go through, the labs, the resources, the mentoring, in terms of the marketing support that's offered, I mean, I could talk at length about that, but you'll see in the lens that there's a section for podcasts. We like to do a podcast episode to get to know each of the startups in our cohort. You'll get an overview, professionally shot, of your company, so you have a nice sleek video that your team members can speak on, and a showcase of your technology. So there's video, there's a podcast, and we do, if there are needs that your company has in terms of branding, website, things like that. That's part of the resources that you get being in the accelerator, is having marketing experts and connections to resources to enhance your marketing.
Very true. Let's see, my company's not incorporated. Oh wait, how much time per week is official Luminate programming during the 6 months? That's a great question. I should have thought of that one. Sorry about that. So what we used to do is we try to program, when we had companies that were in town, we would try to program everything on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This way, for companies that were potentially flying in on a Monday, they could leave on a Friday. Being that we're remote and now there's Zoom fatigue, I would guesstimate right now, because we try to not do anything. I mean, ideally, we don't try to do anything over an hour for Zoom, and 2 hours usually max. But I would assume probably about maybe 6 hours a week, not including one-on-ones with Sujatha and I, because Sujatha and I, and then usually Dame will do a one-on-one with each company for a half hour during the week, just to sort of catch up, hear about milestones, challenges, those kind of things. But I'd say programming is between 4 and 6 a week. And I have to be honest, the programming, I'll call it curriculum, which is, it sounds like schoolwork. It's highly valuable. And we did a webinar a couple weeks ago, and one of the participants, Yasmin, who's a company called Neurosense out of Canada, she was saying, when they first went through one of the pieces of curriculum, we focus a lot on sales and driving leads and how to grow your business and business models. But we also focus on like HR things, because let's say you don't have a handbook, or you're a foreign company and you need to open up a US office. These are all not necessarily exciting things to talk about, but it's very valuable and pertinent information. And what Yasmin had said about 2 weeks ago, I think it was yeah, she learned this. She was in cohort 2. She went through the whole thing. She got all the documents. She had the whole seminar that was put on by HR Works, which is a independent HR company here. And she said, didn't really mean as much to her then, but she needed to do a handbook, or she needed to do something. I can't remember what it was. And she went back and went over the presentation and went over all of her documents. And it was like just like having all that expertise still right there with you. So it's not, we don't do things to keep you busy. If we work on business models, you're using your business and your numbers. So then when you're done, you have the output is that you have a document that's usable. Let's see, our changes in the program post-pandemic. I don't know if I know the answer to that yet. As I try to tell people, if I've done one-on-one calls with them, we've done in the past where we had on-site participation. That was really key, because you built a cohort and you get to actually get more introductions. But we'd always have rotating members. So it might be the CEO for 2 weeks because we're focusing on sales and marketing. And then it might be the CTO because we're doing a lot of technical things afterwards. Going fully remote, it makes it a little bit easier for everybody, but you do lose that in person. So I think our goal, or our hope, I should say, is to have some sort of hybrid, where maybe you'll come into town for a week, and if that's the case in the summer or very early fall, if we're all fortunate enough to do that, that would be ideal, because you're coming in, you'd actually get one-on-ones with Don Galini, who's our chairman of the board, who's phenomenal. You would be able to be introduced to maybe other companies here that can help you. So there's a lot of value in being on site. So I can't say definitively how it's going to work, because we just don't know with vaccines and all, but in a perfect world, we'd have a little bit of both, so that you can get the most value from the program. excuse me, you're looking for or focus on certain type of business solutions in this round. This is only for US, EU companies. No, this is for, we take companies worldwide. We had a company from, we've had companies from Israel, New Zealand, India, Canada, and obviously the EU, and I think even Eastern Europe as well too. So we take companies from everywhere. There's not a certain type. There just really needs to be optics, photonics, and imaging enabling. So it fits our charter, and then it really just has to be a good business case. That's really key. If I can jump back to what I would do on the application, highlight your business case and how you are stronger with it. And if that being in Rochester or tied to Rochester helps your business case, and again, if you're in optics, there's no way you'll be able to avoid Rochester in terms of some way. But I would definitely highlight that in your application. Excuse me again for another water break.
I just wanted to chime in too around what you said about Yasmin Sudagar. During a previous webinar, the panel discussion, she did mention the HR Works training being extremely helpful, but she also mentioned that a little bit about the mindfulness training that is part of the curriculum. And I just wanted to throw in there that there are, we do try to think about every aspect of a business and how to help you. And mindfulness is one of the workshops or pieces of the curriculum, I believe. And one thing that we should mention too is pitch coaching, right? We have Damon on staff, as well as I think in the past, there were workshops devoted to, giving your pitch to your peers and practicing that. And then Andy has mentioned that you have the opportunity to pitch throughout the accelerator, your time at the accelerator.
And Sujatha and I go through your pitch decks very directly, I guess. Talking about technology is not always easy. So having a great pitch deck and something that tells a story that investors who might not understand your technology, but understand the business can use, it's very key. So we work very hard on your pitch decks. We work very hard on investor math, because again, a lot of times companies coming in, this might be the first or second round that they've raised. So you don't have the experience of raising VC funds or angel funds. So we're very, I say hands-on, but I mean that in a positive way, supportive in succeeding for you guys in that sense. So we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to stay on this entire time. If you have questions, either unmute or put it in chat, or if you've gotten all the information you want, feel free to hop off. As Kate mentioned, we'll be sending out an email that'll have a link to this recording as well. And then if you have any other additional questions, as I said, the easiest, easiest email is info@luminate.org. That'll get to me somehow, and then we can, I can get your questions answered. Can we contact alumni of the Accelerator? 100%. What I would recommend doing though is contacting me and letting me make the introduction. I've never had a CEO that said no to the introduction, but we don't give out contact information for any of the teams, but feel free to email me and then email me who you would like to speak to, and then I'll make the introduction. Okay, well, thank you everyone for being on. I will stay on for a few more minutes. And again, if you have any other questions, just shoot us an email. You're all welcome. I see all the chats coming through. Surprised it's clear when I'm trying to clear my throat the entire time, but thank you. problem with Fallout, the application, because we are a New York company that's actively working with the Norwegian company, and we really are one team. Can we clarify? Yes. Yes, ironically, we just had a team from Norway in our last cohort. So as long as the technology and IP is somehow what we're able to invest in, whether it be in the US entity or the Norwegian entity, we just didn't want to make sure that, because we wouldn't be able to invest in the US entity if all the technology and IP is based in Norway, because then unless there's some joint venture agreement that would tie them together. Because the New York State would audit us and they'd be like, what are you guys investing in? And we wouldn't really have a good answer. So yeah, definitely put that on the application and clarify it. And then if we have questions, if it hasn't been clarified to a point where we understand it clearly, we would then reach out and ask for more clarification and give you very specific questions to answer. Excuse me. Any last questions? And if not, I'm going to wrap up the webinar. So we'll give another moment just for any more questions. What if we have a company in Russia but not in the USA? That's okay, as long as you have the ability to work in the USA. Not, obviously things are remote right now, but we've definitely had companies apply from Russia. We've had companies apply from China, Japan, all over the world. All right, we are currently based in New York City. Are we required to relocate to Rochester? No. We don't require relocation to Rochester. We require participation, and right now that's going to be Zoom for the Accelerator. If you do get follow-on funding from us, you're in a very fortunate position because you're already in New York State, but we do require for 1 year to have some sort of New York State presence with a high-level person. So let's say you're a European company and you get the $1 million follow-on or $500,000 follow-on. We'd want you to set up your US entity somewhere in New York and have, hire a top salesperson or a chief marketing officer, some significant hire, but it'd be very easy for you to do because we're funding that. Being that you're already in New York City, as long as you're based in somewhere in New York State, you would fit any of those requirements because you're actually benefiting New York State, if that makes sense. We own 49% equity in the Norwegian company, but the Luminate invested our company if the Norwegian company owns 51%. That's a new question. Never seen that one, but I'm sure we could figure something out. That gets into technical and that gets into legal questions. So I certainly don't want to go into that in any way, shape, or form. But what I would suggest doing is I would definitely apply and notate that in your application and just clarify it. And then if we have additional questions, we would certainly then reach out.
I was just going to suggest, it seems like Dorothy, it seems like she might have a lot of questions. So I don't know if like a one-on-one makes sense to kind of.
Well, as I said, everybody has my email. They can reach out if they would like to. We've received an investment about 2 years ago in another currency. The exchange rate has changed from that date. Should we use the past exchange rate or present? I would use the past. So let's say I'll use just dollars to make it easier. You got a $100,000 investment. That's really what the investment was. Even if it went up in value 10 times to $1 million, you didn't get $1 million investment. You got a $100,000 investment that just happened to over time be worth more. Being that yours has changed with the currency rate about 20% more, I would put that in the application. I would say, we raised $100,000 and maybe in parentheses, due to currency valuations, it's actually worth 20% now. It's actually 120 in our account. You do have to be careful with that because when currencies do shift, you don't want to be on the downside of that. Okay, if there's no more questions, we'll wrap it up about 3 minutes to 2. Thank you everyone for participating. and joining the webinar. Hopefully it was helpful. And again, if you have any other questions, just reach out directly at info@luminate.org.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, everybody. You'll
Thanks,
get-
everyone. Bye-bye.